Started. An existing left organization. Never mind. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it. Don't buy into it, everybody. Don't buy into it. Okay, so like this book is the curriculum of the Basic Principles of Marxism-Leninism Part 1. The worldview of philosophical methodology of Marxist-Leninism for the university and college students, not specialized in Marxist-Leninism. Ho Chi Minh, first English edition. So translated was this person, Luna, forwarded by Vijay Fashad. So that's cool. So Vijay Fashad, Dr. Vijay Fashad, and other ones. So that's good. All right. Let's see here. Probably going to start with introduction. I'm going to read this little quote by Ho Chi Minh. Step by step, along the struggle by studying Marxist-Leninism, parallel with participation in practical activities, I gradually came upon the fact that only socialism and communism can liberate the oppressed nations and the working people throughout the world from slavery. Ho Chi Minh. Dedication and gratitude. We're not going to do dedication. Forward. I'm not going to read the forward. I'll go right into it. Let's see. Introduction. We're going to read the introduction, which is on page 14. Let me look ahead just real quick more. Oh, no. We won't read that one. Editor notes. Hold on. Messages. We haven't even gone to the table of contents yet. I'm trying to find the table of contents. There it is. All right. Found it. Introduction. So the introduction is going to introduction to the basic principles of Marxist-Leninism, a brief history of Marxist-Leninism. Let's go down to it. As soon as I find it. Okay, introduction and the basic principles. Okay, let me make sure. I'm gonna look back up. All right, basic principles of Marxist-Leninism, the brief history of Marxist-Leninism. Okay, cool. So on page 25, we're on page 25. All right. We're going to go ahead and start the introduction. Introduction to basic principles of Marxist-Leninism. 1. Brief history of Marxist-Leninism. Number 1, Marxist-Leninism and the three constitute. Oh wait, make sure. Let me make sure.
Brief history of Marxism-Leninism 1. Marxism and the three constituent parts.
I was right. Constituent parts. All right. Marxist-Leninism is a system of scientific opinions and theories which were built by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and defended the development of Vladimir Lenin. Marxist-Leninism was formed and developed by interpreting reality as well as building on preceding ideas. It provides the fundamental worldview and methodology of scientific awareness and revolutionary practice. It is a science that concerns the work of liberating the proletariat from all exploitative regimes, with the ambition of liberating all of humanity from all forms of oppression. Marxist-Leninism is made up of three basic theories which have strong relationships with each other. They are philosophy of Marxist-Leninism, Marxist-Leninism, political economics, and scientific socialism. Philosophy of Marxist-Leninism studies the basic principles of the movement and development of nature, society, and human thought. It provides the fundamental worldview and methodology of scientific awareness and revolutionary practice. Based on this philosophical worldview and methodology, Marxist-Leninist political economics studies the economic rules of society, especially the economic rules of the birth, development, and decay of the capitalist mode of production, as well as the birth and development of a new mode of production, the communist mode of production. Scientific socialism. Let's see if it's down here. No. Okay. Scientific socialism is the inevitable result of applying the philosophical worldview and methodology of Marxist-Leninism, as well as Marxist-Leninist political economics to reveal the objective rules of the socialist revolution process, the historical steps from capitalism into socialism, and then communism. Annotation note 1. A worldview encompasses the whole of an individual or society's opinions and conceptions about the world, about themselves as human beings, and about life and the position of human beings in the world. That's worldview. The word science, and by extension scientific, in Marxist-Leninism has specific meanings. Friedrich Engels was the first to describe the philosophy which he developed with Marx as scientific socialism in his book Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. However, it should be noted that the English phrase scientific socialism comes from Engels' use of a German phrase, which I cannot say. And I'm going to show it instead. Where is it at? This is the word. Kind of big. Kind of big. All right. All right, so we do have some notes here. We have number 1, Karl Marx in 1818 and 1883, German. Theorist, politician, dialectical materialist, philosopher, political economist, founder of scientific socialism, leader of the international working class. Friedrich Engels, 1820 to 1895, German. Theorist, politician, dialectical materialist, philosopher, leader of the international working class, co-founder of scientific socialism with Karl Marx. Vladimir Lenin, 1870 to 1924, Russian. Theorist, politician, dialectical materialist philosopher, defender of and developer of Marxism in the era of imperialism, founder of the Communist Party and the government of the Soviet Union under leader of Russia and the international working class. There you go. All right, we're continuing with the annotation. Continued. All right. Now, if anybody wants to get this book, is underneath in our server. Diversifying Leftism is underneath the Communist tab, way up there. And I think Lynn has put it in multiple chats so people can get it. Yeah. Wait, are the trolls still going after it? Jesus Christ. Embrace liberalism. Scientific socialism, which is, they used I'm going to try it. Wissenschaft, is a word which can be directly translated to knowledge craft in German, and this word encompasses a much more broad and general concept than the word science. It's as it's usually used in English. In common usage, the word science in English has a relative narrow definition, referring to systematically acquired objective knowledge pertaining to a particular subject. But that Wissenschaft refers to a systematic pursuit of knowledge, research, theory, and understanding. Wissenschaft is used in any study that involves systematic investigation, and so on. Scientific socialism is only a proximate translation of wissenschaftlich Sozialismus. So, scientific socialism can be understood as a body of theory which analyzes and interprets the natural world to develop a body of knowledge which must be constantly tested against reality, with the pursuit of changing the world to bring about socialism through the leadership of the proletariat. Oh my gosh, there was worse ones that you muted? Jesus. Even though these three basic theories of Marxist-Leninism dealing with different subjects, they are all parts of a unified scientific theory system. The science of liberating the proletariat from exploitative regimes and moving forward in human liberation. Number 2. Is everybody okay? Everybody okay right now? Number 2. Summary of the birth and development of Marxist-Leninism. Is everybody okay? We're good to go? Just making sure. There's only 8 of us. Okay, since no one's answering, I'm going to keep going. There have been two main stages of the birth and development of Marxist-Leninism. There have been two main stages. Okay, yeah, I got that. Number 1, stage of formation and development of Marxism, as developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Number 2, stage of defense and development, Marxism into Marxist-Leninism, as developed by Vladimir Lenin. A, conditions and premises of the birth of Marxism, annotation 2. The following section will explain the conditions which led to the birth of Marxist-Leninism. First, we will examine the social economic conditions which lead to the birth of Marxism, and then we will examine the theoretical premises upon which Marxism was built. Later, we will also discuss the impact which 18th and 19th century advances in natural science had on the development of Marxism. Social economical conditions. Marxism was born in the 1840s. This was a time when the capitalist mode of production was developing strongly in Western Europe, and the foundation of the Industrial Revolution, which succeeded first in England at the end of the 18th century. Not only did this Industrial Revolution mark an important step forward in changing the handcraft cottage industry, capitalism into a more greatly mechanized and industrialized capitalism, it also deeply changed society, and above all, it caused the birth of the development of the proletariat. So as the capitalist mode of production moved from feudalism into capitalism, the serfs and all them moved in and were proletarianized and were deemed into wage working, going into the town centers to find jobs and stuff like that. Which capitalism did produce the proletariat, but still on the lines of exploiting the proletariat for their labor value, for profit. So no matter what, yes, the proletariat built because of capitalism, but it didn't take away the exploitation in that nature at all. Exploitation still remained as more proletarians were being developed and produced through the phenomenon of capitalism. And the state arising above them too. Socialism, economical conditions. Marxism was born. All right, did I read that? I don't know if I read that. I'll reread it again. Why not? No, I did. Yeah. Marxism's annotation 3. Marx saw human society under capitalism divided into classes based on their relations to the means of production. That is usually the normal thing. We usually take the relations of somebody like the lumpen proletariat and its relations to the mode of production is further away than the proletariat itself when they're actually in relations with the mode of production directly. Means of production are physical inputs and systems used in the production of goods and services, including machinery, factory buildings, tools, and anything else used to produce goods and services. Capitalism is a political economic economy defined by private ownership of the means of production. Within the framework of dialectical materialism, all classes are defined by internal and external relationships. Chiefly, classes are defined by the relationships to the means of production and to one another. The bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the lumpen proletariat and the means of production. They have different relations to it. The proletariat are the working class, the people who provide labor under capitalism, but who do not own their own means of production and must therefore sell their labor to those who do own who do own means of production, the bourgeoisie, as the owners of the means of production. The bourgeoisie are the ruling class under capitalism. That's fairly self-explanatory. According to Marx and Engels, there are also classes within the capitalist political economy, especially Marx named the petty bourgeoisie and the lumpenproletariat. Now, the lumpenproletariat was expanded further by Fanon and the Black Panther Party. So Marx had a different view of the lumpenproletariat during his time, and I think it advanced further. I think even Lenin probably had to advance that classification of the lumpenproletariat and what it means. So know this, that it was advanced further by like even by Mao, by Fanon, and by like the Black Panther Party. Yeah, Marx on who are okay, wait, let me read this. We're going to read this one. According to Marx and Engels, there are other classes within the capitalist political economy. Especially Marx named the petty bourgeoisie and the lumpenproletariat. Marx defined the petty bourgeoisie as including semi-autonomous merchants, farmers, and so on, who are self-employed, own small and limited means of production, or otherwise fall in between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. We can say that no, that's not the aristocracy, because the aristocracy is just, yeah. In the manifesto of the Communist Party, Marx describes the petty bourgeoisie as fluctuating between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, meaning that they either lose their business and become a worker, or they get successful and become even, yeah, that makes sense. Or they're staying in between them, yeah, I think, yeah. And okay, let me read that. Fluctuating between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Yeah, please give to Fatima. And every renewing itself as a supplementary part of the bourgeois society. The individual members of this class, we're talking about the petty bourgeoisie, however, are being constantly hurled down into the proletariat by the actions of competition. And as modern industry develops, they even see the moment approaching when they will completely disappear as an independent section of modern society to be replaced in manufacturers, agriculture, and commerce by overlookers, bailiffs, and shopmen. Vietnamese textbook of history of high school students gives this definition of the petty bourgeoisie in a specific context of Vietnamese history. The petty bourgeois class includes intellectuals, scientists, small businesses, owners, handicraftsmen, doctors, lawyers, and civil servants. The vast majority of contemporary intellectuals before the August Revolution of 1945, including students belonging to the petty bourgeoisie. So they're talking about the conditions of Vietnam. So they're taking this. Each of these strata is going to have its own particularities in each different capitalist countries. They do have universalities in it, but they have particularities. That's why it's a methodology of analysis, of analyzing the situations and concreteness of things that surrounded the objective concrete reality. In general, they are also oppressed by imperialism and feudalism, often unemployed and uneducated. The petty bourgeoisie were intellectually and politically sensitive. They did not directly exploit labor. Therefore, they easily absorbed revolutionary education and went along with the workers and peasants. Again, this is the conditions of Vietnam, but it's still something to look at. However, the intelligentsia and students often suffer from great weaknesses, such as theory not being coupled with practice. That's important. Contempt for labor, vague ideas, unstable stances, and erratic behavior on political action. Annotation 3 continued. So this is continued. Some other petty bourgeoisie, scientists and small businessmen, freelancers, etc., were also exploited by the imperialists and feudalism. That is why Mao, in his thing, talked about the national bourgeoisie. The national bourgeoisie in China was the small petty bourgeois, right? Who vacillated between the proletariat and this. But imperialism, as they said, affected them, and so did feudalism. So they did sometimes team up with the proletariat, but again, they vacillated, is what you can read. But anyways, their economic circumstances were precarious, and they often found themselves unemployed and bankrupt. Therefore, the majority also participated in and supported the resistance war of revolution. They are also important allies of the working class. In general, these members of the petty bourgeois had a number of weaknesses: self-interest, fragmentation, and a lack of determination. Therefore, the working class has a duty to agitate and spread propaganda to such members of the petty bourgeois, organize them, and help them to develop their strong points while correcting their weaknesses. It is necessary to skillfully lead them, make them determined to serve the people, reform their ideology, and unite with the workers and peasants in order to become one cohesive movement. Then they will become a great asset for the public in resistance war and revolution. So I want to reread that, not reread the whole thing, but I want to reread where this is coming from. So real quick, this whole thing I just read, Vietnamese textbook of history of high school students giving this definition of the petty bourgeoisie in specific context of Vietnamese history. This is historical materialism they're using on the Vietnamese to drive a point. Marx defined the lumpen proletariat as another class which includes the segments of society with the least privilege, most exploited by capitalism, such as thieves, houseless people, etc. In the manifesto of the Communist Party, Marx defined the lumpen proletariat as, quote, the dangerous class, lumpen proletariat, the social scum, that passively rotting mass thrown off by the lowest layers of society. Marx did not have much hope for the revolutionary potential of the lumpen proletariat, writing that they may here and there be swept into the movement by the proletarian revolution, its condition of life. However, prepare it far more for the part of the bribe tool of reactionary intrigue. And again, this was advanced further as it developed. Who's this? Hope I'm reading slow enough for y'all. It should be noted that Marxism-Leninism has never held that the historical mission of the working class is rooted in poverty and impoverishment. Poverty and low standards of living make workers hate the regime of capitalism and causes disaster for the workers. But the basic driving force behind revolutionary struggle of the working class lies in the very nature of capitalist production and from the irreconcilable contradictions between the working class and the bourgeoisie. Moreover, it should not be conceived that a class is capable of leading the revolution because it is the poorest class. In the old societies, there were classes that were extremely poor and have to go through many struggles against the ruling class, but they could never win and keep power and did not become the ruling class of society. History has proven that the class that represents newly emerging productive forces, which are able to build a more advanced mode of production than the old ones, can lead the revolution and organize societies into the regime they represent. Fantasizing poverty and misery is a corruption of Marxist-Leninism. Annotation, this is still continue. Annotation 3, continue. All right. The very existence of the lumpen proletariat is strong evidence of the inhumane nature of capitalist society, which regularly recreates a large class of outcasts at the bottom of society. In the late 19th and early 20th century, millions of Vietnamese people were forced to leave their homes in rural farmlands to work for plantations and factories which were owned by French colonialists. These workers were functionally enslaved, being regularly physically abused by colonial masters, barred from any education whatsoever, and received only a bare minimum to survive. As a result, under French colonial rule, about 90% of the Vietnamese were illiterate, and the French aimed to indoctrinate Vietnamese people into believing that they were inferior to the French. The French colonialists also worked with Vietnamese landlords to exploit peasants in rural areas. Those peasants received barely enough to survive, and like the plantation slaves, were prohibited from receiving education because Vietnamese peasants and colonial slaves composed the majority of workers while being so severely oppressed and living in conditions of such abject poverty. It was difficult to fully distinguish between the proletariat and the lumpen proletariat in Vietnam during the colonial era. Am I going slow enough, Joe? Thank you. I appreciate that. Am I going slow enough for everybody? I won't go until you tell me. Okay, good. During this, yeah, I'm gonna have to follow her. Yeah, I'm gonna have to follow her. She's amazing, I hear. She wrote this book, and she's got a second part I'm gonna read too. During this time, Ho Chi Minh and the other Vietnamese communists developed the philosophy of proletariat piety. The word piety, I think that's it. Let me make sure. That this is the right word. Forgive me, real quick. All right, I was right. It is piety. And what is piety, actually? Let's go look. I just did it. Hold on a second. All right, let's look this up because I need to know what it is. Piety, a quality of being religious or reverent, a belief or point of view that is accepted with unthinking conventional reverence. Okay. Let's go back to my thing. Oh, come on. There we go. This is a good book. I like this book. All right, let me read this. During the time of Ho Chi Minh and the other Vietnamese communists developed the philosophy of proletarian piety. The word piety here is translated of the Vietnamese words H-I-E-U. There's a hyphen on top of the E, which is like a caret, and then there's like a hyphen on the U, which originally comes from the Confucianist philosophy of filial piety. Filial piety demanded children to deeply respect, honor, and obey their parents. Through the concepts of proletarian piety, Ho Chi Minh adapted this concept to the proletarian revolution, calling for the communists to deeply love, respect, and tirelessly serve the oppressed masses. This philosophical concept sought to unite the proletariat and lumpen proletariat and the petty bourgeoisie into one united revolutionary class. Even some feudal lords and capitalists who were themselves oppressed by the colonizing French were willing to fight for communist revolution and were welcomed into the revolutionary movement if they were willing to adhere to the principles of proletarian piety. The working class and peasantry would lead the revolution, and more privileged classes would follow, and all communist revolutionists would serve the oppressed masses through sacrifice and struggle. During this period, many novels were written and circulated widely, which featured main characters who were members of the lumpen proletariat or enslaved by the French, such as Bai Vo, a story about a beautiful peasant girl who was forced to become a thief in the city, and Chi Fu, the story of a peasant who worked as a servant in the feudal landlord's house, who was sent to prison and became a destitute alcoholic after being released. The purpose of these stories was to show the cruelty of the colonialist capitalist society of Vietnam in the 1930s, and to inspire proletarian piety, including empathy and respect for the extreme suffering and oppression of the lumpen proletariat, peasantry, and colonial slaves. These stories also presented sympathetic views of intellectuals and members of the petty bourgeois. For instance, in the novel Lo Hac, a son of a peasant leaves to work for a French plantation, and a father never sees him again. The aged peasant becomes extremely poor and sick without the support of his son, and the only person in the village who helps him is a teacher representing the intellectual segment of the petty bourgeois. Continuing 3 again. The writers of these novels were communists who wanted to promote principles of proletarian piety, rather than looking down on the most oppressed members of society, and rather than sowing distrust and contempt for the petty bourgeois. Vietnamese communists inspired solidarity and collaboration between all the oppressed peoples of Vietnam to overthrow French colonialism, feudalism, and capitalism. Proletariat piety was crucial for uniting and the divided and conquered mass of Vietnam and successfully overthrowing colonialism. Note that these strategies were developed specifically for colonial Vietnam. That's going to the thing that this is particular to their conditions, but it is still a tool for us to learn from, to see what we can apply here in our conditions, locally and everywhere else. Every revolutionary struggle will take place in unique material conditions, and the composition and characteristics of each class will vary over time and from one place to another. It is important for revolutionists to carefully apply the principles of dialectical materialism and materialist dialectics to accurately, and we're going to get more into that, to accurately analyze class conditions in order to develop strategies and plans which will most suitably and efficiently lead to successful revolution. And we're going to go over what is dialectical materialism, materialist dialectics later on. It's going to go into it more. The deep contradictions between the socialized production force and the capitalist relations of production were first revealed by the economic depression of 1825 and the series of struggles between workers and the capitalist class which followed. Now we're on annotation 4. C, definition of contradictions and common characteristics of contradictions. That will be on page, we're going to go over those on 75. So all these things, don't worry about it right now. We're going to go over these things. We're just doing this. So I'm going to read one thing. Material conditions include the natural environment, the means of production, and the economic base of human society, objective social relations, and other externalities and systems which affect human life and human society. All right, here we go. In Marxism, socialization, quote unquote, socialization is simply the idea that human society transforms labor and production from a solitary individual act into a collective social act. In other words, as human society progresses, people socialize labor into increasingly complex networks of social relations. From individuals making their own tools to agricultural societies engaged in collective farming to modern industrial societies with factories, logistical networks, etc. The production force is the combination of the means of production and workers within any society. The socialized production force, quote unquote, therefore is a production force which has been socialized. That is to say, a production force which has been organized into collective social activities. Under capitalism, the socialized production force consists of the proletariat or the working class, as well as the means of production, which are owned by the capitalist. Marx and Engels defines relations of production as the social relations that human beings must accept in order to survive. Relations of productions are, by definition, not voluntary, because human beings must enter into them in order to receive material needs, in order to survive within a given society. Under capitalism, the relations of production require the working class to rent their labor to the capitalists to receive wages, which they need to procure material needs like food and shelter. This is an inherent contradiction because a small minority of society, the capitalist class, own the means of production, while the vast majority of society, the working class, must submit to exploitation through wage servitude and in order to survive. Everybody okay so far? I'm going to pause right there a little bit. Everybody okay so far? Everybody good? Any questions yet? Is it kind of self-explanatory for right now? We're only on the introduction. Speak to me, people. Yes, great. That's one person. Good. All good. All right. Good. Examples of such early... Hold on. Yeah. Examples of such earlier struggles include the resistance of workers in Lyon, France in 1831 and 1834, the Chartist movement in Britain from 1835 to 1848, the workers' movement in Germany, Sonelsa, in 1844, etc. These events prove as historical evidence that the proletariat had become an independent political force which pioneered the fight for a democratic, equal, and progressive society. Annotation number 5. Quick breath. I like this. Here are some brief descriptions of the earlier working class movements mentioned above. So they're going to talk about this. Brief descriptions. And the first one was the resistance of workers in Lyon, France. In 1831, in France, due to heavy exploitation and hardship, textile workers in Lyon revolted to demand higher wages and shorter working hours. The rebels took control of the city for 10 days. Their determination to fight is reflected in the slogan, "Live working or die fighting." This resistance was brutally crushed by the government, which supported the factory owners. In 1834, silk mills workers in Lyon revolted again to demand the establishment of a republic. The fierce struggle went on for 4 days, but was extinguished in the bloody battle against the French army. About 10,000 insurgents were imprisoned or deported. The Chartist movement in Britain. Chartism was a working class movement in the United Kingdom, which rose up in response to anti-worker laws, such as the Poor Law Amendment in 1834, which drove poor people into workhouses and removed other social programs for the working poor. Legislative failures to address the demands of the working poor led to a broadly popular mass movement, which would go on to organize around the People's Charter of 1838, which was a list of 6 demands, which included extension of the vote and granting the working class the right to hold office in the House of Commons. In 1845, Karl Marx visited Britain for the first time, along with Frederick Engels, to meet with the leaders of the Chartist movements, with whom Engels had already more socialist-oriented movements rose up in prominence. Workers' movements in Germany, I can't say the name. In June 1844, disturbances and riots occurred in the Prussian province of Silesia, a major center for textile manufacturing. In response, the Prussian army was called upon to restore order in the region. In the confrontation between the weavers and troops, shots to restore order in the region. The troops shots were fired into the crowd, killing 11 protesters and wounding many others. The leaders of the disturbance were arrested, flogged, and imprisoned. This event was gained enormous significance in the history of the German labor movement. In particular, Karl Marx regarded the uprising as evidence of the birth of a German workers' movement. The Weavers' Rebellion served as an important symbol for later generations concerned with poverty and oppression of the working class in German society. It quickly became apparent that the revolutionary practice of the proletariat needed the guidance of scientific theory. The birth of Marxism was to meet the objective requirements. In the meantime, the revolutionary practice itself became the practical premise for Marxism to continuously develop. Theoretical premises. The birth of Marxism not only resulted from the objective requirement of history, it was also the result of inheriting the acquiescence of various previous established framework of human philosophical theory, which as German classical philosophy, British classical political economics, and utopianism in France and Britain. Let me see something here. Okay. All right. In the original Vietnamese, the word tai ho, I don't know if I'm saying it right, is used, which we roughly translate to the word I'm going to make sure. It's quintessence. Let me make sure. No. Plus, it'd be good to look this up anyways. Quintessence. Typical Marxist. Which is this. The most perfect and typical example of equality or class. All right. Typical Marxist. Typical Marxist. Typical Marxist. I like doing that. It's funny. I think it's funny. Typical Marxist. What is he saying? What are you doing, dude? So what? I have problems with pronouncing words. What's your problem with that? Why are you being ableist? In quintessence. Throughout this book, literally it means the best, highest, most beautiful defined characteristics of a concept. And unlike the British word, quintessence, it has the exclusive positive connotation. Quintessence should not be confused with the universal category of essence, which is discussed on page 156. Yeah, but making fun of someone's literacy is. If you're making fun of me of the way I read and the way I pronounce things, and I'm trying my best, and you're making fun of me about that, you're being ableist. So what if I'm not able to pronounce everything and understand every single word? At least I go look them up and figure out what it means. So I'm trying. And if you don't like the fact that I'm trying, you can kick rocks. Kick rocks. German classical philosophy, especially the philosophy of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel's and Ludwig Feuerbach, had deeply influenced the formation of the Marxist worldview and philosophical methodology. German classical philosophy was the movement of idealist philosophers of the 18th and 19th centuries. Idealism is a philosophical position that holds that the only reliable experience of reality occurs within the human consciousness. Idealists believe that the human reason is the best way to seek truth. that consciousness is thus the only reliable source of knowledge and information. One of Hegel's important achievements was his critique of the metaphysical method. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that attempts to explain the fundamental natures of reality by classifying things, phenomenon, and ideas into various categories. Metaphysical philosophy has taken many forms through the centuries, but one common shortcoming of metaphysical thought is the tendency to view things and ideas in a static, abstract manner. Metaphysical positions view nature as a collection of objects and phenomenons which are isolated from one another and fundamentally unchanged. Engels explains the problem of metaphysics in Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. What do we got going? All right. The analysis of nature into its individual parts, the grouping of the different natural processes and objects of definite definite classes, the study of the internal autonomy of organized bodies in their manifold forms. Where the fundamental conditions of the gigantic stride in our knowledge of nature that have been made during the last 400 years. And George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, 1970 to 1831, was a philosopher, professor, and objective idealistic professor representative of the German classical philosophy. Ludwig von Feuerbach, 1804 to 1872, German philosopher, professor, materialist philosopher. What page am I on? I am on 33 in the PDF. Annotation number 8. Jesus, so many people. But this method of work has also left us a legacy of habits. Wait, make sure. Yeah, 400 years. Yeah. But this method of work has also left us a legacy and habit of observing natural objects and processes in isolation, apart from their connection with the vast whole, and observing them in response, not in motion, as constraints, not as essentially variables, in their death, not in their life. And then this way of looking at things is transferred by Bacon and Locke from the natural science of philosophy. It begot the narrow metaphysical mode of thought peculiar to the last century. So they're saying that they take these things, they don't observe the living movement, the living phenomenon, the living thing. They take it and they observe it when it's dead. And they also try to isolate things when things are interconnected and everything is connected to one another. That's the whole thing. Jesus was only 3 people. Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626, is considered the father of empiricism, which is a belief that knowledge can only be derived from human sensory experience. Bacon argued that scientific knowledge could only be derived through inductive reasoning, in which specific observations are used to form general conclusions. John Locke, 1632 to 1704, was another early empiricist who was heavily influenced by Francis Bacon. Locke, too, was an empiricist and is considered to be the father of liberalism. Engels was highly critical of the application of metaphysical philosophy to natural science, as Engels continues in Scientific, Utopian, Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. It's a good book if people want to read that. Let me read this. I can't say the word because my tongue won't let me say it. Hold on.
Engels was highly critical of the application of metaphysical philosophy to natural science. As Engels continues in Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, To the metaphysician,
Metaphysicians, okay, cool. To the metaphysician, things and their mental reflexes, ideas are isolated, are to be considered one after the other and part from each other, are objects of investigation, fixed, rigid, given once for all. He thinks in absolute, irreconcilable antithesis. For him, the thing either exists or does not exist. A thing cannot at the same time be itself and something else. Positive and negative absolutely exclude one another. Cause and effect stands in a rigid antithesis, not to the other. At first sight, this mode of thinking seems to use very luminous, because it is that of so-called sound common sense. Only sound common sense, respectable fellow that he is, in the homely realm of his own four walls, was very wonderful adventures. Directly he ventures out into the wide world to research, and the metaphysical mode of thought, justifiable and necessary as it is in a number of domains, whose extent varies according to the nature of a particular object of investigation, sooner or later reaches a limit beyond which it becomes one-sided, restricted, abstract, lost in soluble contradictions. In the contemplation of individual things, it forgets the connection between them. In the contemplation of their existence, it forgets the beginning and the end of that existence, of their repose, and it forgets their motion. It cannot see the wood for the trees. So like they keep doing the stagnation things and not understanding that things are connected and always moving. Dialectical materialism stands in contrast to metaphysics in many ways. Rather than splitting the world into distinct isolated categories, dialectical materialist philosophy seeks to view the world in terms of relationships, motion, and change. Dialectical materialism also refutes the hard empiricism of Bacon and Locke by describing a dialectical relationship between the material world and consciousness. Love that. And we'll see more of that on page 88. For the first time in history, the human philosophy, Hegel, expresses the content of dialectics in strict agreements with the system of rules and categories. Dialectics is a philosophical methodology which searches for truth by examining contradictions and relationships between things, objects, and ideas. Ancient dialecticians, also such as Aristotle and Socrates, explored dialects primarily through rhetorical discourse between two or more different points of view about a subject with the intention of finding truth. In this classical form of dialectics, the thesis is presented. This thesis is an opening argument about the subject at hand. An antithesis or counter-agreement is then presented. Finally, the thesis and antithesis are combined into a synthesis, and it's going to go over that more, which is an improvement on both the thesis and the antithesis, which brings us closer to the truth. Hegel's resurrected dialectics to the forefront of philosophical inquiry for the German idealist, as Engels wrote in Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. Hegel's work's greatest merit was the taking up again of dialectics as a highest form of reasoning. The whole Greek philosophers were all born natural dialecticians, and Aristotle and most encyclopedic of them had already analyzed the most essential forms of dialectic thought. Hegel's great contributions to dialectics was to develop dialectics from a simple method of examining truth based on discourse into the organized systematic model of nature and of history. Unfortunately, Hegel's dialectics were idealistic in nature. Hegel believed that the idea served as a primary basis of reality. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels strongly rejected Hegel's idealism, as well as the strong influence of Christian theology on Hegel's work. But they also saw great potential in his system of dialectics, as Marx explains in Capital, Volume 1. The mystification which dialectics suffers in Hegel's hands by no means prevents him from being the first to present its general form of working in a comprehensive and conscious manner. With him, it is standing on its head. It must be turned right side up again. If you, gotta do a thing. Hold on. There we go. Conscious matter, with him, it is standing on its head and must be turned right side up again. If you would discover the rational kernel within mystical shell. Starting with a critique of the mysterious idealism of Hegel's philosophy, Marx and Engels inherited the rational kernel of Hegelian dialectics and successfully built materialist dialectics. In order to understand the ways in which the critique of Hegel's philosophy by Marx and Engels leads to the development of dialectical materialism, some background information of materialism, and the conflicts between idealism and materialist philosophy in the era of Marx and Engels is needed. Materialism is a philosophical position that holds that the material world exists outside of the mind, and that human ideas and thoughts stem from the observation and sensory experience of this internal world. Materialism rejects the idealist notion that truth can only be sought through reasoning and human consciousness. The history and development of both idealism and materialism are discussed more in the section. The opposition of materialism and idealism in solving basic philosophical issues on. So again, we're going to get into that too. The difference. More to come. More to come. Communists need anarchists to keep them honest. Sure. In the era of Marx and Engels, the leading philosophical school of materialism was known as empiricism. Empiricism holds that we can only obtain knowledge through human sense perception. Marx and Engels were materialists, but they rejected empiricism. One reason Marx and Engels opposed the strict empiricist view was that it made materialism vulnerable to attack from idealists because it ignored objective relations and knowledge that went beyond sense data. The empiricist point of view also provided the basis for the subjective idealism of George Berkeley, and the skepticism of David Hume. Berkeley's subjective idealism is empiricist in that it supports the idea that humans can only discover knowledge through direct sense experiences. Therefore, Berkeley argues individuals are unable to obtain any real knowledge about abstract concepts such as matter. Similarly, David Hume's radical skepticism, which Engels calls I can't say this word, but I'm going to look it up. Decline. Let me see this word. Hold on a second.
Similarly, David Hume's radical skepticism, which Engels called agnosticism, okay, denies the possibility of possessing any concrete knowledge. As Hume wrote in A Treatise of Human Nature, I am ready to reject all belief and reason, and can look upon no opinion even as more probable or likely than another. Hume's radical skepticism lay in his empiricist beliefs that the only source of knowledge is sense experience. But Hume went a step further, doubting that even sense experience could be reliable, adding, quote, the essence and composition of external bodies are so obscure that we must necessarily, in our reasoning, or rather conjecture concerning them, involve ourselves in contradictions and absurdities, end quote. Later, in the appendix of the same text, Hume argues that conscious reasoning suffers from the same unreliability. Quote, I had entertained some hopes that the intellectual world would be free from those contradictions and absurdities which seem to attend every explication that human reasons can give of the material world. Engels dismissed radical skepticism as scientifically a regression and particularly merely a shamefaced way of superstitiously accepting materialism while denying it before the world. Engels directly refutes radical skepticism in Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. And here he says, how do we know that our senses give us correct representation of objects we are perceiving through them? Whenever we speak of objects or their qualities, of which we cannot know anything of certain, but merely the impression which they have produced on our senses. Now, this line of reasoning seems undoubtedly hard to beat by mere argumentation, but before there was argumentation, there was action, and human action had solved the difficulty long before human ingenuity invented it. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. From the moment we turned to our own use, these objects, according to the qualities we receive in them, we put to an infallible test the correctness and otherwise of our sense perception. So we got to do experiments and we got to do things to understand it better. Yeah. This concept of determining the truth of knowledge and perception through practical experience is fundamental to dialectical materialism, philosophy, and the methodology of materialist dialectics, and is discussed in further details in chapter 3. See, they're going to discuss these more. Another weakness of empiricism is that it denies the objectiveness of social relations, which cannot be fully and properly analyzed through sensory experience and observation alone. Marx saw that social relations are indeed objective in nature and can be understood despite their lack of sensory observability, and that doing so is vital in comprehending subjects such as political economy, as he observed in Capital One. The true reality of the value of commodities contrasts with the gross material reality of these same commodities, the reality of which is perceived by our bodily senses, in that not an atom of matter enters into the reality of value. We may twist and turn a commodity this way and that, as a thing of value it still remains unperceptible by our bodily senses. In other words, Marx pointed out that no amount of sense data about a commodity will fully explain its value. One can now know the size, weight, and hardness, etc. of a commodity, but without analyzing the social relations and other aspects of commodity which can be directly observed with the senses, one can never know or understand the true value of the commodity. The materialism of Marx and Engels acknowledges the physical material world as the first basis for reality. But Marx and Engels also understood that it was vital to account for other aspects of rational knowledge, such as social relations. Marx and Engels believed that empiricist materialism had roughly the same flaw as idealism, a lack of connection between the material
in consciousness, while the idealists completely dismissed sense data and relied exclusively on reasoning and consciousness. The empiricists dismissed conscious thought to focus solely on what could be sensed. It is important to note that while Marx and Engels rejects empiricism, they did not reject empirical knowledge, nor empirical data, which is collected from scientific observation. On the contrary, empirical data was key to the works of Marx and Engels in developing dialectical materialism. So you can see there's a difference between empiricism and empirical data. Empiricism, sensory. Empirical data based on observation. As Lenin explained, Marx took one of the economic formations of society, the system of commodity production, and on the basis of, that's fine, you don't have to, and on the basis of the vast mass of data, which he studied for not less than 25 years, gave the most detailed analysis of the laws govern this formation and its development. And so, the dialectical materialism of Marx and Engels served to bridge the gap between idealism and materialism. They believe that our conscious thoughts are derived from material processes, but that consciousness can also influence the material world. That's materialist dialectics. This is discussed in more detail in the section Materialism and Dialectical Materialism. Marx and Engels also criticized many limitations of Feuerbach's methodology and viewpoints, especially Feuerbach's prescriptions for how to deal with social problems. But they also highly appreciated the role of Feuerbach's thought in the fight against idealism and religion to assert that nature comes first and that nature is permanent and independent from human willpower. And it says, here's the viewpoint. Viewpoint of a point of view or respective is the starting point of analysis which determines the direction of thinking from which problems are considered. Marx and Engels were critical of Feuerbach's hyper-focused humanist viewpoints. Feuerbach's atheism and materialism offered an important foundation for Marx and Engels to develop from the idealist worldview into materialist worldview, which led them directly to develop the philosophical foundation of communism. Ludwig Feuerbach was one of the young Hegelians who adopted and developed the ideals of Hegel and other German idealists. Feuerbach was the humanist materialist. He focused on humans and human nature and the role of humans in material world. Like Marx and Engels, Feuerbach dismissed the religious mysticism of Hegel. And importantly, Feuerbach broke from Hegel's religious mystical beliefs that humans descended from a supernatural origins, instead describing humans as originating from the natural material world. Feuerbach also distinguished between the objectivity of the material external world and the subjectivity of human consciousness, thought, and he drew a distinction between external reality as it really exists and external reality as human perceives it. Feuerbach believed that human nature was rooted in specific intrinsic human attributes and activities, as Feuerbach explains in The Essence of Christianity. What then is the nature of human, and which he is conscious, or what constitutes a specific distinction, the proper humanity of man, reason, will, affection. All right, we're doing good. Feuerbach explained that the actions of thinking, willing, and loving, which correspond to the essential characteristics of reasoning, will, and love, are what define humanity continuing. Quote, reason, will, love are not powers which man possesses, for he is nothing without them. Wait, let me read that. Reason, will, love. Okay, I did read it right. for he is nothing without them. He is what he is. He is what he is only by them. They are the constituent elements of his nature, which he neither has nor makes. The inanimate. Oh, wait. Let me see what this word says. It's animating, bringing of life. Animating, determining, governing powers, divine absolute powers, to which he can oppose no resistance. In his collective works, Feuerbach further explains the materialism is supported by the fact that nature predates human consciousness. Natural science, at least in its present state, necessarily leads us back to a point when the conditions for human existence were still absent, when nature, i.e. the earth, was not yet an object of the human eye and mind, when consequently nature was an absolutely non-human entity, oh my gosh, I can't say it because it's in French. Idealism may retort, but nature also is something thought of by you. Certainly, but for this, it does not follow that this nature did not at one time actually exist. Just as from the fact that Socrates and Plato did not exist for me, if I don't think of them, it does not follow that Socrates and Plato did not actually at one time exist without me. Marx and Engels were heavily influenced by Feuerbach's materialism, but they took issues with Feuerbach's sharp focus on human attributes and activities in isolation from the external material world. As Marx wrote in Thesis of Feuerbach, the chief defect of all hitherto existing materialism, that of Feuerbach included, that is that reality is conceived only in the form of object, but not as a sensuous human activity. Sensuous human activity has a very specific meaning to Marx. It grew from two conflicting schools of thought. The idealists believe in external worlds can only be understood through the active subjective thought process of human beings, while the empiricist materialists believe that human beings are passive subjects of the material world. Marx synthesized these contradicting ideas into what he called sensuous activities, which balanced idealist and materialist philosophical concepts. According to Marx, humans are simultaneously active in the world in the sense that our conscious activity can transform the world, and the passive in the sense that all human thoughts fundamentally derive from observation and sense experience of the material world. It'll be on chapter 2. So, Marx and Engels believes that Feuerbach was misguided in defining human nature by our traits alone, portraying the essence of man is as isolated from the material world and from social relations. In addition, Feuerbach's humanism is based on the abstract ideal version of human beings, whereas the humanism of Marx and Engels is firmly rooted in the reality of real men living real lives. As Engels wrote in Ludwig Feuerbach and the End of the Classical German Philosophy, he, Feuerbach, clings fiercely to nature and man, but nature and man remain mere words with him. He is incapable of telling us anything definite either about real nature or real men. But from the abstract man of Feuerbach, one arrives at real living men only when one considers them a participant in history. The cult of abstract man, which formed the kernel of Feuerbach's new religion, had to be replaced by the science of real men and of their historical development. This further development of Feuerbach's standpoint beyond Feuerbach was integrated by Marx in 1845 in The Holy Family. Let's see here. The Holy Family is a book co-written by Marx and Engels, which critiques the young Hegelian, including Feuerbach. All right. Marx and Engels believed that human nature could only be understood by examining the reality of actual humans in the world through our relationship with each other, with nature, and with the external material world. Importantly, it was Marx's critique of Feuerbach which led him to define potential actions as the key pursuit of philosophy, which these immortal words from thesis of Feuerbach, philosophers have hitherto only interpret the world in various ways. The point is to change it. That's what we have to do. That's the practical application. We have to change what we've learned and what we see and what needs to be changed. We have to fix contradictions and notice them. The British classical political economics presented by such economists as Adam Smith and David Ricardo also contributed to the formation of Marxism, historical materialist conception. Smith and Ricardo were some of the first to form theories about labor value in the study of political economics. They made important conclusions about value and the origins of profit, and about the importance of material production and rules that govern economies. However, because there were still many limitations in the study methodology of Smith and Ricardo, these British classical political economists failed to recognize the historical characteristics of value, the internal contradictions of commodity production, and the duality of commodity production labor. So Adam Smith, 1723 to 1790, British, logic professor, moral philosopher, philosophy professor, economist. David Ricardo, British economist, 1772 to 1823. All right. Historical characteristics of value. Let's see how far we got here. On page 39. Hold on. I'm going to stop. There's plenty of places to stop. Okay. Historical characteristics of value. How's everybody doing so far? It's only the introduction. We're going to get more into depth into these concepts more. This is just the introduction. How's everybody feeling so far? Who's all here? Okay, good. Historical characteristics of value. Marx generally admired the work of Smith and Ricardo, but saw major flaws which undermined the utility of their classical economic theories. Perhaps chief among these flaws, according to Marx, was the tendency for Smith and Ricardo to uphold a historic view of society and capitalism. In other words, classical economists see capitalism as existing in harmony with the internal and universal law of nature, rather than seeing capitalism as a result of historical processes of development. Marx did not believe that the economic principles of capitalism resulted from nature, but rather from historical conflicts between different classes. He believed that the principles of political economies changed over time and would continue to change into the future, whereas Smith and Ricardo saw the economic principles as fixed, static concepts that were not subject to change over time, as Marx explains in The Poverty of Philosophy. Economists express the relations of bourgeois production, the division of labor, credit, money, etc., as fixed, immutable, internal categories. Economists explain how production takes place in the above-mentioned relations, but what they do not explain is how these relations themselves are produced. That is, the historical movements that gave them birth. These categories are as little eternal as the relations they express. They are historical and transitory products. internal contradictions of commodity production. All right. The Marxist term of commodity is specifically something that has both as use value and a use form. But in simpler terms, a commodity is anything that can be bought or sold. Importantly, capitalism transforms human labor into a commodity, as workers must sell their labor to capitalists in exchange for wages. Marx pointed out that contradiction arise when commodities were produced under capitalism, because capitalists who own the means of production decided what to produce based solely on what they believe to be most profitable. The commodities that are being produced do not always meet the actual needs of society. Certain commodities are underproduced while others are overproduced, which leads to crisis and instability. Duality of commodity production labor. In Capital, Marx describes commodity production labor as existing in a duality. That is to say, it exists with two distinct aspects. First, there is abstract labor, which Marx describes as labor power expended without regard to the form of its expenditure. This is simply the expenditure of human energy in the form of labor, without any regard to production or value of the labor output. Second, there is concrete labor, which is the aspect of labor that refers to the production of a specific commodity with a specific value through labor. Marx argues that human labor, therefore, is simultaneously an activity which will produce some specific kind of products, and also an activity that generates value in the abstract. Marx and Engels were the first economists to discuss the duality of labor, and their observation on the duality of labor were closely tied to their theories of the different aspects of value, use value, exchange value, etc., which was key to their analysis of capitalism. Smith and Ricardo also failed to distinguish between simple commodity production and capitalist commodity production, and could not accurately analyze the form of value in capitalist commodity production. I think that's why they call it the anarchy of production. Commodity production. Simple commodity production, also known as petty commodity production, is the production of commodities under the condition which Marx calls the simple exchange of commodities. Simple exchange occurs when individual producers trade the products they have made directly themselves for other commodities. Under simple exchange, workers directly own their own means of production and sell products which they have made with their own labor. All right, let's repeat that. Simple commodity production, also known as petty commodity production, is the production of commodities under the conditions which Marx called the simple exchange of commodities. Simple exchange occurs when individual producer trade the products they have made directly themselves for other commodities. Under simple exchange, workers directly own their own means of production and sell products which they have made with their own labor. Simple commodity production and simple exchange used what Marx refers to as CMC, mode of circulation. Now we're going to get to it. Circulation is simply the way in which commodities and money are exchanged for another. CMC stands for commodity, money, commodity. That's what CMC stands for. And it's C going into the M, which is money, and the M going into the commodity. So with simple commodity production, the simple exchange workers produce commodities which they then sell for money, which they use to buy other commodities which they need. For example, a brewer might make beer, which they sell for money, which they use to buy food, housing, and other commodities, which they need to live. In the CMC mode of circulation, the producer and consumer of commodities have a direct relationship to the commodities which are being bought and sold. The seller have produced the commodities sold with their own labor, and they directly consume the commodities which they purchase with the money thus obtained. Capitalist commodity production and capitalist exchange, on the other hand, are based on MCM, mode of circulation. So this is different. So this is MCM stands for money, commodity, more money. Under this mode of circulation, capitalists spend money to buy commodities, including the commodified labor of workers, with the intention of selling commodities for more money than they began with. The capitalist has no direct relationship to the commodity being produced and sold, and the capitalist is solely interested in obtaining more money. Capitalist commodity production, therefore, uses the M money, C commodity, M money mode of circulation. So when they talked about the commodity production, we're talking about commodity, money. Okay, that was different. Yeah. All right, where was I at? Capitalist commodity. Okay, let me read this. Under the mode of circulation. Okay, I think I read that. No, I'm going to read it again. Capitalist commodity production therefore uses MCM, mode of circulation, in which capitalists own the means of production and pay wages to workers in exchange for their labor, which is used to produce commodities. The capitalists then sell these commodities for profit, which are not shared with the workers, who provide the labor which produced the commodity. Value forms. We're probably going to go over this more and more. We're going to get really down to it. So this is just the introduction, everybody. And we're getting to we're going to try to close it out here soon. This is one of the most value form. This is one of the most important and potentially most confusing concepts in all of Marx's analysis of capitalism. Marx explains this principle at length in the appendix of the first German edition of Capital Volume 1. But here are some of the fundamentals. All right, everybody. Let me look ahead real quick. Actually, it's a long one. We might stop at value for right now and go back just a couple pages after that. Because value form is going to be bigger. And like they said, it's going to be more complex. We're going to stop there for the day. This is a lot. This is only the introduction, everybody. Only the introduction. So we're going to get more into the details of things as they start talking about in this. I'm going to put a bookmark. All right. So does anybody want to come up, have a conversation, maybe help me out, help each other out to understand this better? Everybody's welcome to come up. No? No one wants to come up? No one has any questions? Page 40. 40. Not 41, 40. I know, not tonight, because they're missing. Yeah, I know. Not tonight for you. Who else is in here? Does Dooley want to come up? You want to come up, Dooley, or nah? You don't have to if you don't want to. I don't think Dooley can hear me. Oh, Dooley's coming up. Let's see what we have to say about this. Oh, they're up here. What up, Dooley?
Hello.
What do you think so far?
I think it's very informative. I don't really have any questions, but I like how it went through the criticisms and applications of certain philosophies by certain philosophers. And I like how I also like how it made it to where it was stating there were some things right, but there was critique needing to be made to make it better.
Yeah,
and that came from the other side. So it wouldn't be either or. It would be taking what is right and then applying that.
Yeah, instead of seeing like the proletariat, we're just saying the proletariat. We mean the masses not being able to enter into history. That they're seen outside of history and not the ones that are the makers of history. You know what I mean? The workers and the masses are the makers of history and need to be brought into the forefront. And that was the misunderstanding of Feuerbach, I think. Was that?
Yeah.
You know,
Feuerbach made people out to be passive, not interconnected.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, that empiricists, that I just learned, that they don't see things as interconnected. They observe things, and that's another thing. They talked about observing thing in its living conditions, right? Not dead, not stagnant, but actually doing the process right in front of you, right?
Yeah,
that's the whole point. You know?
Yeah, that's like the problem with the idealist is they think that people are purely active. The problem with empiricists is that they think that people are purely passive. They are both wrong, but sort of have some truth to them because people are interconnected. We can be active and passive at the same time.
Yeah. And I would say that is it quantum physics that the string theory proves that things are connected even from vast space, like atoms are connected and shit. But I understand that. But yeah, things are connected. Nothing is stagnant, and we must observe things in its movements. But we also need to, still need to run experiments and see how things interact. We got to do those too through implementations of things. So yeah,
learn where the passivity is. Learn where the active is.
Changing the contradictions into something else. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a request real quick. Let's see what this person has to say.
Okay. I'm hop down. Thanks for letting me up.
You don't have to.
I know. I'm just going to hop down, though.
What up? What up, Ken?
Hey, hi. Thanks so
What's
much.
your age?
I joined. I'm 35.
Sweet. What brought you up?
35. And I joined in the midway, I think. Is there a particular reading we can go through? Or?
Huh?
Is there a particular reading? Would you recommend a certain reading? I can see some page numbers some people are posting. I'm really
on page
keen
40
to
of
read
this
the
book.
material.
Yeah, you can get this book offline. It's a free PDF. You can get it.
All right, that's great. But
yeah.
Curious, I'm still learning. So
me too.
My question is, sorry again, is this part of a lecture, or is this you are just basing on the book, or is this part of a university lecture or something? I'm just trying to understand the context so I know.
I'm reading this book for people to get. I'm reading this book for people to get it, understand it, and people that do know more about it to come up and actually have conversations with us. So that way we can have a better understanding of what we're reading and be better Marxists.
Thank you so much. I'm at the exact right place. I'm going to read the book and come back. But now I'm thinking I have a very basic level of economics knowledge. So how Marxist theories would recommend that coordination of supply, for example, in a capitalist system, they are only based on demand supply, consumer behavior and all of that. But I really love this idea of production-based economy and how Marx actually has seen labor is amazing. I was just hearing what you're saying and I was just writing the notes. It's amazing. But then I feel then Marxist systems which should have a good administration and very advanced systematic planning of micro level production and macro level distribution, supply chain. Did Marxist at all recommended any system, or was it up to us to design that system, or is there any recommendation around it?
It's up to us to design the system that fits the needs of the masses and it fits our material conditions. No matter what, it's still like the same process where we own our own labor. And we own the processes of that labor, and we also own the distribution management, and we also do observance of we need housing, so let's start producing more housing. Well, we have enough. So it's based on human need, and it's based on society's need instead of the need of the capitalist to exploit and to become richer. It's based on human needs.
So that
if
system
the
will
human needs
basically
more housing,
evolve.
then we'll produce more housing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So for each country, for that unique culture, that system, administration system, will evolve as per the need of the society. If I'm correct, would it be correct to say that?
Well,
Yes, that's beautiful. Yeah.
There's universalities that can work. Like, for instance, Mao developed a universality of mass line theory, and that can be applied in each different place, but it's applied differently, and it's engaged and related
different setting,
depending on the material conditions. That's what makes it. That's what makes it particular, but makes it universal at the same time.
Does this book has a chapter on it, or is there anything else?
They will. This is only the introduction. They'll get more in depth with all these things like quantitative and qualitative, dialectical materialism, materialist dialectics. It'll get further into it.
I'll leave you with one last thought, and I'll read more and definitely join again. My other thought I had in mind is, if there is such a system evolves from the bottom up, the person who are in control of those administrators or who are planners, I think those should be virtuous people who has good wisdom and kindness and care for the loving the people, because if they get corrupted with a capitalist system or any other system, they will corrupt the system, you see. So I see, I'm not sure if Marx talks about virtuous leaders and how do we elect and appoint them.
Lenin talks about that. He talks about it in State and Rev, where he talks about that they'll be seen as civil servants, not above the people, but with the people, and they'll have average working wage and a subject to recall.
Right. Is there a way to nurture them, educate them, and make them ready for their job? Like, does Marx have any recommendation, or is it?
One of the major tasks of a communist is to teach the people so they can be consciously aware of their conditions and the reality of the world that they're forming in front of them, so they can take the reins with each other as a collective movement to bring the advancements of human development. So our job is to educate the masses, and the masses is to be able to create organically, because this is the Maoist position, organically their leaders, the vanguard, and the Communist Party themselves.
Yeah. What I was thinking about is, everyone has a role in the society, carpenters, and then still there would be some people called planners. If everyone is a planner, that's okay. But if they can appoint the planner anytime, that's also okay. But I'm wondering if there's a mentorship, leadership, skills, attributes Marxists define that to become a planner from a carpenter, as in the society, how to become a planner who plans the carpentry across the world. I mean, that's still, to me, higher level administration plan, not higher, I wouldn't use the word higher, but participatory authority or something like that.
Lenin would say that the job would be that everybody in the society will be able to serve those functions. Not one person will be a specialist in those things. Everybody can become a specialist eventually. Like the beginning phases, I can see that. But the proletariat, when it develops, it should be able to serve those functions. Anybody should be able to serve those functions, not just particular class of people or a particular group of people.
Yeah, so any good teacher, any good carpenter, any good medical doctor should be able to run their planning sections for the country or for that particular village. They should have that wisdom developed as part of their professional training, is it?
Yeah. But we don't gatekeep those things, right? We let people have access to that, so that they can also learn those things and perform those functions. What I'm asking is, currently our capitalist system is trained with MBA graduate. We send them to university and train them. They are called managers. You see, these are the guys. These are the bosses, and they fuck up the world. Because capitalist intelligentsias will need to portray that and actually do proletarian intelligentsia, right? They need to put themselves and basically portray that position for proletarian science, proletarian government, proletarian society, proletarian, all of it. Worker-based society, mass-based society, not based on the ruling class,
After I listening to all of this, I really wish to see Marxist MBAs, my friends. We need that. It's terrible need of society. These managers, how they think is so capitalist, they don't see the point. I think we need Marxists, because Marxist manager to me is in that particular industry who has the wisdom. If it's a carpenter who have been there from bottom up, who is ready for planning at any point of time. That's the beautiful way to think about it. So management function is not a higher level role in the society, but a participatory So because that's very important, because carpenters are the people who are passionate about carpentry. They
Yeah.
will not break the system. They will not cheat people for carpentry. Their idea is to build the best table. I know them. They are loving their profession. What has happened today is these big corporates like warehouse corporations take over all of them and cheat with us of profits, and they are selling
cheapen
every
everything.
product with
Yep.
cheating called marketing discipline.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll leave it
We
there, but
cheapen
I'll be
products and
listening. Coming back
we
to you.
cheapen commodities so that we have to keep buying
Yeah.
and buying and buying and buying and waste and waste and waste. You know?
Yeah, I see the point.
Yep.
But only thing I want to understand is I want to read more about how that to master those skills as a carpenter. How would I get that planning skills? So I'm really interested in developing curriculum, write concrete something out of this. So that's my aim, because I'm into teaching as a little bit. So I'll definitely keep in touch and develop this and come back to you time to time. Thanks so much. And how long
appreciate
you're going to
you.
run this? Like, is a particular day or a particular time, please?
I do this.
Like this
I don't know if you're in the U.S. Are you in the U.S.?
I'm in Australia at the moment.
You're Australia. So
Yeah.
take what you have now and go back an hour
Yep.
and a half. Go back an hour and a half from the time you see
Okay.
now. That's when I come on.
Okay, I got it. And daily or
Daily, every day.
time to time?
Every day.
Thank you so much. I'll be in touch. Sure.
All right. Well, I'm going
be
to go ahead
back
and
to
close this
listening.
down. I
All right.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right. I'll see ya.